You've been waiting, watching, trying to figure out if what you're feeling is real or if you're just imagining things because the person you're falling for doesn't say much. They don't text first. They pull back right when things start to feel warm. And you're sitting there questioning everything, questioning yourself, questioning them, questioning whether any of this is even worth it. And then something shifts, something small, something so subtle you almost miss it, and your whole nervous system goes on high alert. Here's what nobody tells you about avoidant attachment. The people who have the hardest time getting close to someone are also the ones who show the most when they're falling, because for them, every tiny move is huge. Every small gesture costs them something. And if you don't know what to look for, you'll miss it completely. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand something about avoidance that most people spend years trying to figure out, and it's going to change the way you see everything they do. Now, let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand before we even talk about the signs is this. Avoidant attachment isn't a character flaw. It isn't someone being cruel. It isn't someone playing games with you. It's a deeply wired survival strategy that formed long before you came into the picture. When someone grows up in an environment where closeness felt unsafe, where needing people led to disappointment, where being vulnerable led to pain, the nervous system learns something very specific. It learns that distance is protection, that independence is survival, that needing someone is a weakness. So the avoidant adult becomes someone who genuinely craves connection, but is terrified of it at the same time. They want intimacy, but the moment it gets real, the moment it gets close, something inside them sounds an alarm, and that alarm says run, pull back, disappear, create space. This isn't them being cold. This is their nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do, protect them. So when an avoidant starts falling for someone, what happens is genuinely fascinating from a psychological standpoint, because the pull toward you starts to fight with the pull towards safety. And you can see that fight if you know what you're looking at. The signs I'm going to talk about aren't big dramatic declarations, they aren't grand romantic gestures, they aren't late-night confessions, because that's not who avoidants are. The signs are small, they're behavioral, they show up in patterns over time, and if you're in your head about whether this person likes you, these are the things you need to be tracking. Let's start with the first one. They start remembering the small things you said. And I don't mean the big stuff. I don't mean they remember your birthday or your job or where you went to college. I mean the small stuff, the throwaway stuff. The stuff you mentioned once in passing and completely forgot you even said. You mentioned 3 weeks ago that you hate ice in your drinks, and they remembered. You talked briefly about a show you used to watch as a kid, and they brought it up again. You said something offhand about a fear you have, and weeks later, they reference it in a way that shows they've been thinking about it. This is significant. Here's why. Avoidants are not checked out. They're actually highly observant, because when you grow up in an environment that was unpredictable, you develop a very sharp radar for reading people and situations. You learn to pay attention, you learn to notice everything, but you don't always show that you've noticed. So when an avoidant starts to fall for you, their natural tendency to observe gets aimed entirely at you. They're cataloging you. They're storing details about you. And the fact that they're now letting those details slip out, the fact that they're referencing things you said, that's them letting you see that they've been paying attention. That's them choosing to be seen. For someone with avoidant attachment, being seen is one of the most frightening things in the world, because being seen means being known. And being known means being vulnerable, and vulnerable means exposed, and exposed means potentially hurt. So when they say something that reveals they remembered something small about you, they're taking a risk, a real one. In their nervous system, that moment of, I remembered what you said, cost them something. It opens a small window into the fact that they care, and caring is scary for them. Pay attention to this sign, not just once. Track it over time. If they keep doing it, if details you've shared keep coming back up, that's not coincidence. That's someone paying very close attention to you because you matter to them. Now let's talk about the second sign. They start reaching out with no real reason. And this one is huge for avoidance specifically because it goes against their default programming in a significant way. Avoidants don't reach out unnecessarily. Their baseline mode of communication is functional. They respond. They reply when needed. They engage when there's a clear purpose. They're not the person sending, hey, thinking of you texts. They're not the person who calls just to chat because casual reaching out requires them to show initiative. And showing initiative reveals interest, and revealing interest feels dangerous. So if you notice that an avoidant is suddenly finding reasons to contact you, pay attention to what those reasons actually are, because they're going to be thin. They're going to be almost laughably flimsy. They might send you a meme, they might share an article, they might ask a random question they definitely could have looked up themselves. They might mention something they saw that reminded them of you. None of these things feel like declarations of love, but that's exactly what makes them important, because for an avoidant, reaching out with no real reason is the equivalent of someone else showing up at your door with flowers. It's that significant internally, even if it doesn't look that way from the outside. What they're doing is creating contact while keeping plausible deniability. The meme isn't a love letter, the random question isn't a confession, but what they're actually saying underneath all of it is, I was thinking about you and I wanted to connect with you. They just can't say that directly yet. Maybe not ever, if they're in the early stages. So they say it through the side door. Watch for the frequency of this too. Once or twice means nothing. But if you start noticing a pattern where they're consistently finding reasons to be in your orbit, consistently creating small moments of contact, that pattern is telling you something important. Now let's move to the third sign. And this one requires you to understand something about the avoidance relationship with their own inner world. They start sharing things about their past or their inner life voluntarily, unprompted. Small things, yes, but real things. Avoidants are incredibly private people, not because they have nothing to say. Actually, it's the opposite. They often have very rich inner lives, deep thoughts, complex feelings, a lot of unprocessed experience, but they've learned through their early attachment experiences that sharing these things is dangerous, that people won't hold them carefully, that vulnerability leads to pain, so they become skilled at staying surface level. They can be charming, they can be interesting, they can have great conversations, but there's a wall, and most people never get past it. Avoidants are expert wall builders. So when an avoidant starts to lower that wall even slightly, it's a big deal. You might notice they mention something about their childhood, something about a difficult relationship in their past, something about a fear they have or a way they struggle, or they might not go deep. They might say it almost casually, like it's not a big deal, like they're just making conversation. But you need to understand that what just happened is not casual. They chose to let you in. They chose to share a piece of their real self with you, and for someone with avoidant attachment, that choice is enormous. It's like them handing you something fragile and watching to see what you do with it. The way you respond to these moments matters a great deal. By the way, if you make a big deal of it, if you push for more, if you make them feel like they just opened a door you're now going to charge through, they'll shut down immediately and possibly pull back entirely. The right response to an avoidance vulnerability is calm acknowledgement, receiving it warmly but without overwhelm, matching their energy rather than escalating it. That's how you make it safe for them to keep the door open. But the sign itself, them choosing to share, that is them falling, that is them letting you closer than most people get. Don't underestimate it just because it doesn't look dramatic. Let's go to the fourth sign. They start getting uncomfortable around other people who show interest in you. Now this is interesting because avoidants typically don't like to claim people. They don't like to label things. They don't like to make things official because official means committed, and committed means trapped in their nervous system's language. They resist ownership. They resist dependency on both ends. But here's the thing, when they're falling for you, something starts to override that resistance, something very human and very primal. They start to feel something about the idea of you with someone else. And because they can't just say that, because saying it would mean admitting that they care, they express it indirectly. They might go quiet if someone else flirts with you in front of them. They might make a subtle comment about the person who texted you. They might bring up someone who seems interested in you in a way that's trying to be casual, but isn't quite landing as casual. They might suddenly become more present, more engaged, more attentive, right after a moment where you got attention from someone else. This is not jealousy in a toxic, controlling sense. This is the emotional signal of someone who is developing feelings they don't know how to handle yet. The feelings are real, the attachment is growing, but their toolkit for expressing it is limited. So you see it leak out sideways. If you notice an avoidant behaving differently around your other connections, if there's a subtle shift in their energy when someone else enters the picture, that's not nothing. That's their internal world showing up on the outside, even when they're trying to keep it hidden. The fifth sign is one that a lot of people miss because it looks like progress followed by regression. And if you don't understand avoidant psychology, it feels crazy. It feels like you're on a roller coaster. But once you understand it, it actually makes perfect sense. They start pulling back right after a really good moment between you two. And instead of this being a sign they don't care, it's actually a sign that they do. Here's what happens. You have a great conversation, a real one, deep, connected, warm. You feel it, they feel it. There's something undeniably real happening in that space between you. And then the next day, they're distant. They take forever to reply. They're cold or flat or just not there in the same way. And you spiral. You think you did something wrong. You think it didn't mean what you thought it meant. You think they're gone. But here's what's actually happening in their nervous system. That closeness, that warm, connected, real moment triggered their attachment alarm because intimacy feels threatening to the avoidant nervous system. Even good intimacy, even wanted intimacy, because it represents vulnerability, it represents need, it represents a potential for pain. So the closer they feel, the more their system says danger. And the more danger the system registers, the more it pushes for distance. It's an automatic response. It's not a choice they're making on purpose. It's a deeply ingrained protective mechanism that switches on exactly when things feel good and real. The pullback after connection is not them rejecting you, it's them regulating. It's their nervous system doing what it always does when closeness gets too close. The fact that the good moments are getting better, the fact that the connection is getting deeper, means the pullbacks will temporarily get more intense too, because the stakes are rising in their system. If you see this pattern, if you notice that the distance follows the warmth, that's not a red flag. In the context of avoidant attachment, it's actually a sign that the connection is real enough to trigger their deepest fears, which means you've gotten somewhere real with them. The way to handle this is not to chase, not to panic, not to blow up their phone, not to demand an explanation. Give them the space they're seeking. Hold your own nervous system steady and trust that if the pattern is genuine, they will come back. And they usually come back a little warmer, a little more open each time they return. Now let's talk about the sixth sign. And I want you to really sit with this one because it's the most subtle and also the most meaningful. They start making small but consistent accommodations for you in their life. Not grand gestures, not big changes, small ones, barely noticeable ones, but consistent. Avoidants guard their freedom intensely. Their time, their space, their routines, their independence. These aren't just preferences, they're armor. They're the walls that keep them feeling safe. When they let you into their time without a functional reason, when they shift something to include you, when they choose to spend their limited social energy on you consistently, that is them making room for you in a way that goes against their deepest protective instincts. It might look like this. They mention something coming up and, for the first time, seem to want you involved. They adjust their schedule to see you even when it's inconvenient. They make a small inside reference that shows you've become a fixture in their thinking. They introduce you to someone in their life, even casually. They include you in something they normally do alone. None of these look like love confessions. None of these are the sweeping romantic gestures you see in movies. But in the avoidant love language, these accommodations are enormous. They're the equivalent of someone who never lets people in, saying, "I'm letting you in." They're just saying it through behavior instead of words. This is also why it's so easy to miss. Because if you're waiting for the dramatic declaration, if you're waiting for them to show up and say, "I have feelings for you, and I want this to be real," you might wait a very long time. That's not how avoidants communicate their developing attachment. They communicate it through presence, through small, consistent choices to include you, through the build-up of tiny decisions that all point in the same direction. Now, I want to zoom out for a moment and talk about something important, because this conversation wouldn't be complete without addressing the reality that exists alongside all of these signs. Recognizing that an avoidant is falling for you doesn't automatically mean things will be easy or straightforward, or that the relationship will give you what you need. That's a genuinely important thing to hold at the same time as everything else we've talked about, because here's what can happen. You see the signs. You understand the psychology. You give them space. You're patient. You're calm. You're the person who gets it, and you might still end up waiting longer than is healthy. You might still experience confusion and inconsistency in ways that take a real toll on your nervous system and your sense of self. You might still find yourself doing a lot of emotional labor to accommodate their patterns without getting much back in return. Understanding why someone does something doesn't mean you have to endlessly put up with it. Understanding avoidant attachment is meant to give you clarity, not permission to set aside your own needs in service of someone else's healing journey. There's a question worth asking yourself honestly, and it's not, does this person have feelings for me? If you've been paying attention to the 6 signs we just talked about, you might actually have a clearer answer to that question already. The more important question is, what do I actually need in a relationship? And is this person with where they are right now capable of meeting those needs? Because there's a version of this where you see all the signs, you know they're falling, and you also recognize that their pace and their patterns are causing you genuine pain. Both of those things can be true at once. Avoidance can genuinely care and still be unavailable for the relationship you need. Holding both of those truths at the same time is hard, but it's honest. I'm not saying walk away. I'm not saying stay. That's a decision only you can make, with full knowledge of your specific situation, your specific person, your specific needs. What I'm saying is that understanding someone's attachment patterns should make you more informed, not more resigned to being treated in ways that don't work for you. Let's also talk about what happens when these signs show up together, because individually, any one of them could be explained away. They remembered something small. Maybe they just have a good memory. They reached out with a flimsy reason. Maybe they were bored. They pulled back after a good moment. Maybe they were just busy. But when you start seeing multiple signs stacking up over time, when you start seeing a pattern where the small things keep happening consistently, that's when you have something real to work with. One sign is a data point. Multiple signs over time is a pattern, and patterns are where the truth lives. If you're sitting there right now running through your mind, counting which of these 6 signs you've seen in your person, and the answer is 3 or more showing up consistently over weeks or months, that's meaningful. That's not you being delusional. That's not you seeing what you want to see. That's data. I want to say that to you specifically because one of the harshest side effects of being in something with an avoidant is that you start to question your own perception. You start to think, maybe I'm imagining it, maybe I'm projecting, maybe I just want this so badly that I'm reading things into nothing. And that self-doubt can be genuinely destabilizing. You're not crazy. If you're seeing consistent behavioral patterns that match what we've talked about today, those patterns are real. Your perception is real. What you're feeling is responding to something real. The challenge isn't whether it's real. The challenge is what you do with real. Because here's what I want you to understand about avoidants who are genuinely falling for someone. They need a very specific environment to move forward. They need to feel like they won't be consumed. They need to feel like their freedom won't be taken away. They need to feel like vulnerability won't be used against them. They need to feel like they can go slow and that slow will be respected, not punished. If you create pressure, they run. If you issue ultimatums too early, they shut down. If you make them feel like they're failing you, their nervous system reads that as confirmation of everything they feared about closeness, and they protect themselves the only way they know how. But here's the other side of that. You also can't just wait indefinitely. You also can't set aside your need for reciprocity and clarity. You also can't become someone who walks on eggshells forever just to keep an avoidant comfortable. That's not a relationship, that's a performance, and no one can sustain a performance forever. The sweet spot, if there is one, is this. You hold yourself steady. You don't chase. You don't cling. You don't make their emotional unavailability the center of your world. You keep living your life, pursuing your interests, seeing your people, doing the things that make you whole. And within that, you stay open and warm to them. You receive their small gestures with genuine appreciation. You respond to their vulnerability with calm steadiness. You give them space when they need it without making them pay for needing it. And you also know your limit. You know at what point waiting stops being patience and starts being self-abandonment. You know what you need for a relationship to feel real and good and sustainable, and you don't trade that core need away, no matter how much you care about this person. That's the balance, holding both, open to them, rooted in yourself. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in these conversations about avoidant attachment, and that's the experience of the avoidant themselves during all of this. It's easy to frame avoidants as the ones causing difficulty, as the ones who are complicated, hard to read, hard to get close to. And from the outside, from the perspective of the person who wants more closeness and isn't getting it, that framing makes sense. The pain is real, the confusion is real, the longing for more is real. But inside the avoidance experience, something else is happening. They're not indifferent, they're not choosing to withhold out of cruelty. Many avoidants are genuinely in conflict. Part of them wants what you're offering. Part of them wants closeness and connection and love. That part is real. But there's another part, an older part, a more deeply wired part that's terrified of exactly what the first part wants. Living with that inner war is exhausting. Being pulled towards someone and frightened of them at the same time. Wanting to reach out and being unable to. Feeling something real and not having the language or the safety to express it. Watching yourself pull back from something you want and not fully understanding why. Many avoidants aren't even fully conscious of this dynamic in themselves. They haven't had language for it. They haven't had someone help them map it. They just experience themselves as someone who needs a lot of space, who gets uncomfortable when things get too close, who struggles to stay when relationships become intense. They might even judge themselves for it. They might wonder why they can't just be normal, why they keep self-sabotaging, why closeness feels like a threat. Understanding this doesn't mean your needs matter less. It means you're seeing the full picture. You're seeing a person struggling with their own wiring, not a person strategically making you suffer. And when you see the signs we talked about, the small memories, the flimsy reaching out, the tiny vulnerabilities, the subtle jealousy, the post-closeness pullback, the quiet accommodations, you're seeing someone fighting that inner war on your behalf. You're seeing someone whose fear of closeness is slowly being overridden by their feelings for you. That's not nothing. That's actually kind of extraordinary. But again, it has to be paired with your own clarity about what you can sustain and for how long, because admiring someone struggle doesn't mean your needs disappear.